Not even 2 o'clock. Hey everyone, welcome back to How to Train Your Gavin. In today's video, I will be going through the best books of 2022 in my opinion. I have read 350 books this year and I have picked round about 30 to talk about in this video. To help you out, I have got timestamps in the description box for the middle grades, the young adult, the adult, the classic, and the graphic novels and manga. Before I get into actually talking about these books as well, I just want to say, I don't feel like I can recommend books. This year, I have a little bit of an identity crisis. I feel like I've read other people's favorite books and I haven't quite found things that make me a unique reviewer or a unique booktuber. Yeah, this year all I did was read for special vlogs, projects, reading other people's favorite books and such like that. So I'm coming into this video what am I recommending? What am I telling you guys? But I think I do have quite a few here that maybe are a little bit, none of it's unique, let's be honest. Yeah, I don't think anyone comes to me for recommendations. That's the thing. I don't think anybody watches me for recommendations. But these are the best books I read in 2022, okay? So the first middle grade book that I want to discuss is Amari and the Great Game by Baby Alston. The sequel to Amari and the Night Brothers, that was my favourite book of 2020. I was worried that this wouldn't live up to Amari and the Night Brothers, but it definitely did. I thought this one was just as great as the first one. It had all the things that I loved from the first one in this one, but we do still follow Amari Peters. She has been welcomed into the world of the supernatural, and she's part of the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. So without spoiling the first one, there was an enemy revealed, and there is a little bit of a trial in this one too. There are some, well, as you can tell from the title, A Great Game. But everything I loved about the first book was present in this one. Character work was still fantastic. It was so exciting, fast-paced. And I had a great discussion with Murphy and Amber Elise on this book too. So if you want to know more in-depth thoughts on this book, I will have a link to that live show down below. Absolutely a great sequel. Another great sequel was Rainbow Grey, Eye of the Storm by Laura Ellen Anderson. I loved the first one so much. That came out last year, and it does follow Ray Gray. She is part of the Weatherlands, and she becomes imbued with rainbow magic. And this one just continues the story. It is Ray trying to get a handle of her powers, but things start happening, the cloud creatures start disappearing, and Ray is blamed for it. So she has to pretty much clear her name and go on this adventure, and when I tell you, there was a moment in this that got me really emotional. I'm not joking. It was so phenomenal and another great sequel. And honestly, I had a great track record with sequels this year. So definitely another middle grade that I think you would enjoy. Although I would say this is probably more catered towards the children's category rather than the middle grade category. It's probably just a little bit younger. Quite possibly my favourite middle grade of the year is Like a Charm by Elle McNicoll. Bloody love this one. This one follows Ramya, and she has the ability to see things that other people can't see. So for example, we're set in Edinburgh and she can see the Grey Friars Bobby come to life, and she can see a market that other people can't see. There is a vampire who works at the library, and just so many great things that happen in this book that I was just like, this is just wonderful. Ramya is a fantastic protagonist as well, and I cannot wait for the sequel. I believe this is just going to be a duology, so this is the first one in a duology, and I think the sequel comes out early next year, so very excited. It's going to be just as good as this one. I can just feel it. I can feel it. The next middle grade is another sequel, and that is Sabotage on the Solar Express by MJ Leonard and Sam Sedgman. This one is the 5th book in the Adventures on Train series, and I have loved this series for, what is it, nearly 3 years now, and it just doesn't stop getting better. This is, honestly, it took the Adventures on Train series to new heights. This one was set on a train that it was a little bit like Speed, you know, the film Speed with Sandra Bullock, and I think it's Keanu Reeves. And it was a little bit that, but set on a train. And it was fantastic. So exciting. Loved it. 10 out of 10. Cannot wait to read more. I know there's a 6th one that's just come out, but I still need to read that one, and I will definitely get to it at some point. I have to put at least one Goosebumps book on this list, I think, and the best Goosebumps book I read this year was Cry of the Cat by R.L. Stine. This is the first book in the Goosebumps Series 2000 series, and it was definitely the best one of the bunch, the best one of the year. This was the first one I read in the year. They all went downhill after that, pretty much. I mean, there were some good ones, a few hidden gems every now and then, but it just wasn't a good year for Goosebumps. Cry the Cat was a great start to a new series. It was a lot darker than I was used to with the Goosebumps original series, and it made me realise that I had a lot of trauma from the original Goosebumps series, because I just expected certain things to happen because R.L. Stine likes to repeat himself a lot. But in this one, he actually took me by surprise, so I've got to give him kudos for that. It might take you by surprise to mention this, but I would probably include the Animorphs series in this list. I mean, this series did have a lot of low points, probably more so than it had high points. But I would say that this series in general by Katee Applegate was a revelation. It was actually surprisingly deep, and it made me think about so many things. The themes were just so prominent. Honestly, I dismissed this series as a silly series with really weird book covers, but then I read it and I realized, wow, I actually kind of love these characters and I care about what happens to them. And this whole commentary on war and what these kids go through, it's a great series, it really is. I don't think most of it is held up to the test of time, but I think overall this is a bit of a gem of a series, and nostalgia rules. But I would say the first book, The Invasion, did have a great start and made me so intrigued about the sci-fi world of it. And it does follow 5 kids who find themselves embroiled in an alien war that the rest of the human race don't know about. And these kids can morph into animals, and it's so good. It's honestly, it is great. It is a great series. But there's just so many low points, and yeah, that's what I'll say about it. I have a 4.5-hour video on it, so... Right, another surprise. Okay, right, another surprise. I can't believe I'm mentioning it in this video, but Pretty Little Liars, like, the first one, I did think was pretty good. It hooked me. It did. It hooked me in. It had some great storylines that I was going to explore. I mean, while I don't agree about how these storylines turn out half the time, and while I hated the series by the end of it, honestly, like, there were so many bad books by the end of it. The first 2 arcs of Pretty Little Liars, though, were great. They are popcorn entertainment, that's how I would describe it. But the first book, I would say, I had such a fun time reading it. I really did. It gave me such false promise for the rest of the series, because I thought the rest of it would be, well, it would have the same kind of tone. But honestly, it went around in circles by the end. But the first book in general, if you like Pretty Little Liars, the TV show, I feel like you would like this. At least the first book, at least. Surely, right? But I would not recommend the whole series. Genuinely, stop at book 8. This one follows 4 friends, Spencer, Aria, Hannah, and Emily, and a few years before, their queen bee went missing, and it kind of deals with the fallout of that and the suspicions that are put on each one of them, as well as a mysterious A who is now harassing the girls. And honestly, it was really interesting. It was. The last young adult book that I really enjoyed this year was Twin Crowns by Catherine Doyle and Catherine Webber. This one follows Rose and Ren, and they are 2 sisters who were separated at birth, and one of them rules in the kingdom and the other one was brought up by witches, and they have no idea that they are related to one another. But Ren, she tries to overthrow the throne, and Rose gets kidnapped and taken to the witches, and it leads to this really great adventure. There is a bit of romance in here as well that I was really shipping. It was fun young adult. Like, this reminded me of the young adult greats back in the day. You know, when you were like really caught up on Throne of Glass, for instance, or just those kinds of books. It's like, it was very reminiscent of it, but I thought it had a great story, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next because I thought it was so intriguing the entire way through. I don't often read young adult books, but I do think that this one really stood out from a lot of the ones I've read in the past few years. And what else can I say about it? Just like the other young adult books that I read, it was a really fun time. Although Animorphs wasn't all that fun, it did get really depressing. Okay, I'm going to start off with one that I think might be my favourite one of the year, and that's Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. The film is my favourite film of all time, and I was worried going into this that I wouldn't enjoy it, but I really did. I thought it was fantastic. I thought the way that Michael Crichton wrote this world, it felt so believable, even though it deals in the world of dinosaurs and bringing dinosaurs back to life. And there are so many scenes in this that weren't even in the film, and it made it that much more scary, and it made it more sinister as well. There were some ideas that were thrown around in here and some themes that were explored that I thought, oh, we didn't really touch that in the movie, but if it did, it would probably make it less of a family-friendly movie. Just the implications of the things that were mentioned. This was probably darker than the film, and I think it had more teeth too. It had more teeth, it had a little bit more action, and I think this is my favourite book of the year. Maybe, yeah. I think. I don't actually know, but I would say that this one left an impression on me, and I just had the best time. Oh, the next one. Oh, I'm still reeling after the end of chapter 1. I really am. But that's Confessions by Kinae and Minato. I cannot forget what happened in this. Like, I feel like my memory on a lot of these books is terrible, and I remember loving them, I really do, but half the time I can't remember why I love them. But this one, there were so many plot points and a few twists and turns that I'm like, that's going to stick in my mind forever. In the end of chapter 1, seriously, I don't think I've read a plot twist like it since Regifted Gang by the Ghost of Christmas. It was so Good. And yeah, oh sorry. So this is about a teacher, and she is giving the last kind of lecture to her students on like the last day of her being employed there. And a few months before, she had a daughter who died on the school premises, and she tells the kids of this classroom, I know two of you murdered her, and I'm gonna slowly reveal who did it, kind of thing. And it was so good. It was, oh, it had me on the edge of my seat. I was so intrigued. It goes through like 5 different perspectives almost, and each and every one was just as interesting as the last. And I did do a live show for this with Kayla and Katee for the Literary Dead Book Club. So if you want to know like way more as well, I linked that live show down below. I thought we had a great discussion on it, and it was so good. I loved it. I loved it. Another one that was translated that I loved was The Disaster Tourist by Ko-eun, and this, I don't think I've ever read anything like it. Picture a world where there is this company called Jungle, and they do trips to disaster zones or places where like things like massacres or great disasters have happened, and they make an itinerary out of it. And it's so weird and sinister. But we do follow Yona, and she works for Jungle, and she experiences something in the workplace that honestly I feel like a lot of the things that were explored in this were so well done. But she experiences something in the workplace, and she is sent to go on one of these trips that Jungle organise, so she can decide whether or not this trip will stay on the kind of program. So she has to go there, she has to critique the itinerary and stuff like that. But as she's there, she realises something more sinister is happening there, and I don't even know what to describe this as. I wouldn't exactly say it was a thriller, and I wouldn't exactly say it was literary, although I do think it was beautifully written. It was translated by Lizzie Buller. I thought it was great. Like, honestly, I thought it was great. It was so unique and original. And honestly, I was like, what's going on? What's going on this island? Yeah, I don't think I've read anything like it. And it's so short as well. And I feel like it could have benefited from maybe exploring some things more. But I do like me a short and punchy book. This one, I felt was short and punchy. The one that honestly made me cry, and I don't know if I want to mention it, is In Every Morning, The Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Fredrik Bachman. Oh, this deals with some tough topics. We have a granddad who has Alzheimer's, and we are going through, so much. We're going through pretty much the end of his life, and it's like, it's short, so it's got that going for it, but it did make me cry. I have had family members who have had Alzheimer's. This one does hit close to home, but it does so in such a beautiful way. There are so many phrases, so many paragraphs that I feel like you could quote from this to demonstrate how beautiful a story it is, and a lot of the language and kind of dealing with... Let's not talk about it any longer. But this one was fantastic. I'm putting this down, don't fall please. But I have to high five this cover every single time I say it. Middlegame by McGuire. I honestly didn't anticipate liking this as much as I did, mainly because every single time I read the summary of this, it confused me and I didn't know how to describe it. This is set in a world where alchemy and science are intertwined, and we have a maker called Reed. I believe his name was Reed, and he helps to create children and observes them and experiments with them. And we have Roger and Dodger. They are twins, and they were part of this kind of experiment, and they can communicate telepathically with one another, and they were separated quite young to kind of be observed. And yeah, this is kind of their story and them potentially coming together. I loved it. I genuinely did. I was like, I haven't read anything like this before. It was so beautifully told. A massively intriguing book that is so dense with ideas, and I probably do need a reread of this for me to pick up on all the other ideas that McGuire had. So much to love about this book. Early in the year, I read The Raven and the Reindeer by Kingfisher. This is a Snow Queen sort of retelling, and it has been made sapphic, which I loved. And for the longest part of this book, I thought this was just almost a copy and paste of the Snow Queen story. Like, there wasn't really that much to differentiate between the original, but then it just did. It made its own path, and it was so amazing. I loved the language. I loved the story. Like, the Snow Queen story is my favourite fairy tale, so to see it embodied in this, and to see, I mean... There are some scenes that are quite disturbing in this, I'm not gonna lie. There are some disturbing scenes in this, but I felt like it handled the source material so well and honoured it while also creating its own path with it. If you enjoyed The Snow Queen, I genuinely think you would enjoy this too. Quite possibly the only romance on this list, Learn My Lesson by Katie Robert. I loved how sizzling and sexy this book was. Like, I haven't read anything so hot in all of my life. This is Hades and Megara and Hercules. Oh, need I say more? This is the second book in the Wicked Villain series, but I didn't read the first book, and I don't really think you need to. I think you can read this all on its own, and I really appreciated how different it was to the Hercules story, like, you wouldn't believe. But it also had little parts of it where you could recognize something from Hercules, and I appreciated that. I love the attention to detail, but it was just so hot. That's all I can say about it. Like, I've never read anything as hot as this before, and I have read some questionable stuff. But I really like the character work, I really like the hot scenes, and yeah, I think my favourite romance of the year. The only memoir that I've read this year is We Are Not Broken by George M. Johnson. I really do want to read that. I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I do want to read that at some point, especially the audiobook since it's narrated by her. And I listened to the audiobook of this and it was narrated by George M. Johnson, and it was just so nice to go through their life again. I loved All Boys on Blue. It was like one of my favourite books of 2020. But this one offered like a different side to George and their upbringing and their life, and it was such a touching nod to their Nana? Is that what they called her? Oh yeah, raised by Nanny, their fiercely devoted grandmother. So yeah, it was so touching and so nice, like, to see family represented in such a way was the most beautiful thing I've read this year. There were things about George's family that I could see in my own, and I could relate to so much of the sibling dynamics, as well as the dynamic with their grandmother, with Nanny, and she just felt like such a real, I mean, she was a real person, but like, I feel like George painted her in a way that she felt real to me. Like, I knew her personally, and I wanted to have met her, I really did, and this was really touching. I just think this is absolutely beautiful and gorgeous. I do have a couple of Agatha Christie books that I like this year, starting with The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which I'm so surprised I figured out who the killer was. Honestly, the amount of times people told me, you'll never guess this one. And me guessing the killer of this is my proudest moment of 2022. It really is. But saying that though, even though I guessed who it was, it didn't detract from how great I thought this book was. It was so interesting, and I thought the mystery was slowly done in such a way that kept me hooked the entire way through. And I feel like with me kind of figuring out the killer early on, it made me like it just that little bit more, because I was kind of seeing how they would interact with other characters and how they would keep their secret and stuff like that. Sometimes guessing beforehand and getting it right means, oh, you know what, I had my eye on you. You know, I had my eye on you the entire time, and I was right. And I feel like it adds a different side to the story, and you're just waiting for that reveal, and the reveal was just so good. I love the reveal of this. And then the other Christie novel that I liked this year was And Then There Were None, and I really liked the way that this story unfolded. I've never seen an And Then There Were None adaptation, and I have seen some parodies and things like that, so I was kind of impressed when at one point I guessed who it was, and then Christie threw me off the scent. And then I realised maybe it couldn't be them. And then it turned out that it was. And then I was like, oh. This one follows a group of people who go to an island. They've been invited by a mysterious person they do not know. And they start dying one by one. It's great. The more I think about this, the more I really do end up loving Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. When I first read this one, I did really like it. I think I gave it 4 stars. But then the more I've been sitting on it and the more I've been thinking about it, I realised, gosh, I actually really like that more than I thought. This was such a beautiful and harrowing story, and it had a great ending. Some of it was hard to get through because there's a lot of introspection, but we do follow Ada and the kind of journey that she has to go through, especially since she didn't really have the most conventional of bringings into the world, if that makes sense. So yeah, this does follow Ada and her other personalities, essentially, and she moves to the US where this really traumatic event happens that further fragmentizes, I'm so bad with words, fragmentizes her further, and the deep dive look at the implications of that and the ramifications of that. There were so many times when I was surprised by the direction of the story. It made me question things, it made me think about things a lot deeper than I'm used to, and when a book can do that, when it can really engage with my brain the way that Freshwater did, I'm just like, give me more, you know? I have a couple that I read quite recently, and the first one is The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin, and oh gosh, I loved the plot of this. This one had such a fantastic story, and it was beautifully written. I love the way that it tied to nature. So we follow Clara, and she is an Everwitch. She can kind of control the climate, and there are usually like autumn witches or winter witches, but Clara is an Everwitch so that she can pretty much control each season, or she changes with each season as well. So this was like such a fascinating look at how the magic was part of nature and how it affected Clara as a person and how she changed and what she went through. I love the fact that her emotions were tied to this magic, this elemental magic. And I just felt like such an affinity towards Clara for that. She was a great character to follow, honestly, and yeah, I just related to her a lot, and I just think it's gorgeously written. Finley Donovan is killing it. Honestly, I keep saying this about a lot of the books in this video, but like this one I had so much fun with. We follow Finley, and she is a struggling writer, and she's meeting with her agent, and she's telling her agent about the book, essentially, but somebody overhears and misconstrues it, leading to the most hilarious of instances where Finley is kind of becoming a little bit of a hitman in the weirdest way possible. This one reminded me a little bit of Serial Mom, the film from years and years and years ago. So the dark humor of this was so on point, it had me chuckling so many times. And there were quite a number of characters that I absolutely fell in love with. I just think this was so fantastically plotted, and it made me so excited for the sequel. And then Aaron from Boot and Busy didn't like the sequel, so now I'm a little bit worried. But I thought this was a fantastic start to a series, and I really did love the fact that Finley had so much going on and we were privy to seeing exactly what she was going through, and then making it that much more like unbelievable like the more it went on. And I just love the craziness of that, I really do. And I feel like yeah, it was a blast. It was an absolute blast of a book. I'm struggling to say things about these books, I'm not gonna lie. When I think about how much I enjoyed them, yeah, I enjoyed them, but like, and what of it? You know? So there's two that I don't own that I read recently. One of them is A Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. I was shocked. I was as shocked as anyone about that result, because Peter Swanson, I did a video series reading BookTube's most hated thrillers, and one of them was a Peter Swanson book, and I hated it. And then I thought, I'll give these authors a second chance. So Peter Swanson was part of that video. And then I thought, he would be my least favourite, no doubt. He'll be my least favourite again. But then, The Kind Worth Killing turned out to be my favourite video of that vlog. So this one follows Ted and Lily, and on a flight, they start sharing like the most intimate details about one another, and Ted is in a pretty much a loveless marriage, and he kind of jokes that he would love for his wife to die, and Lily then comes up with the idea of like taking care of it. And I think it's the same kind of premise as, is it like Strangers on a Train or something? I've never seen or read that, so I don't quite know. So I was so shocked and like surprised by a lot of the stuff that happened in that book. Like it took so many twists and turns. There was something that happened like pretty much at the end of the first part of the book, I would say maybe a quarter of the way through, that I was like, can't believe it did that. But maybe that happened in the source material, I don't know. I have no idea. But it really shocked me. In fact, a couple more things shocked me later on. And I was like, damn, Peter Swanson has really turned it around. Like that was actually, in my opinion, quite a cleverly plotted, nicely written book. That was such a huge contrast to the book that I read of his before that I just genuinely despised. So I feel like I had to put The Kind Worth Killing in this video just because of how much it surprised me and how much I had written Peter Swanson off until I read that book. And it was, yeah. And then also Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Even though that book gave me an existential crisis because anything to do with space and sci-fi stuff makes me feel small in this world, and it explores like how big the world actually is. But in that one, we do follow a professor. He is called Ryland, and he is part of this mission into space, and he is like the sole survivor of this mission. So everything is on his shoulders, and there was something happening to the sun. I'm starting to forget now, but something was happening to the sun, and he had to try and figure out a way to save the planet. And there were so many different things that I loved about that book, including a friendship, like a specific friendship that happened. So many things that I wasn't expecting. I don't know what I was expecting going into the sci-fi, but it took me by surprise. Again, like a lot of the books in this video, they took me by surprise. They were pleasantly amazing. And Project Hail Mary, oh, it was so exciting. There was so many like different exciting times in it. And I felt like with different timelines happening as well, we did have some flashbacks and stuff like that. I felt like it kept it to a minimum so that we got enough of a sense of the character and what happened before so that we can feel even that more invested in what was happening in the present. So I genuinely did end up loving it. I really did. And I didn't think I would because I am quite scared and intimidated by sci-fi. But I do love sci-fi. I just, as I said, existential crisis. I feel small and insignificant. So yeah, but it was fantastic. Anyway, the last two adult books are classics, and the first one, Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This is my third favourite Jane Austen book, and I did do a vlog reading Jane Austen earlier. And the two books that I like the most are books that I had read in the past. So this was the first new Jane Austen book to me that I really loved this year. And I just loved the sisterly bond between Marianne and Eleanor, and the exploration of that, and their love, and their romances, and their interests. And it was so... like, it kept me reading so much. I felt like there was quite a little bit of scandal as well, but like in the Jane Austen sense of the word scandal. So it wasn't really that scandalous, but at the same time I was shocked. I was so shooketh by a lot of the things that happened and the things that were going on between these characters. I was like... But I do actually really love Jane Austen's writing, and I have found through reading Jane Austen this year that I do have an affinity towards classics. But I couldn't help but love the sisterly bond, and... yeah, the story. I thought the story was fantastic. Dracula by Bram Stoker. I freaking loved it, and I didn't think I would, because this is told in epistolary format, and I don't really like books in epistolary formats. But this one somehow made that format interesting for me, and it's a classic as well, so that's even more impressive in my eyes. We are told at the start of this book through Jonathan Harker's journals that he is going to Transylvania to meet someone called... I was about to say Bram Stoker, but it's not. Called Dracula, and the kind of mystery surrounding Dracula and what he is, and the whole vampiric aspect of it. And then Dracula's kind of escape to Whitby, and then we follow Mina, and there's just so many fantastic characters that even though this is a classic, I still felt so incredibly attached to them and what happened to them as well. There was a specific character who I felt sad for. I just loved the imagery of it. I loved the description of it, especially at the start and going through these woods, and it was just beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And I read this while I was in Whitby as well, where a lot of this book is set, and it was so incredible, such a great experience. I don't think I've had an experience like this year with anything, and it just made me feel so great, and it made me love classics even more. It made me want to read more classics in the future. But yeah, the length of it as well is quite a big one. But it was never boring. In my eyes, I don't think it was ever boring. Probably one of my favourite gothic classics of all time, which I do have a video for. Getting into manga and graphic novels then, I'll start with the only graphic novel on this list, and that is the Walking Dead series by Robert Kirkman, Charlie Adlard, Tony Moore, and Cliff Rathburn. Only, I think, 2 books made me cry this year, and that was In Every Morning The Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, and this one. Specifically, something that happens at the end. I hated the ending of this series, by the way. I hated it, I didn't like it, but I still cried. And I shed actual, genuine tears. I was distraught by what happened at the end of this series. This is just the first compendium. There are 4 in total, but I'm just going to put this one up because I felt like this was such a great start of the series. This is to do with a zombie apocalypse. It was the inspiration behind the AMC TV show, which was one of my favourite TV shows of all time, but I had never ever read the graphic novels. And I thought, you know what, I don't really have to if I love the TV show. But honestly, how wrong was I? Because so much changed, but also there was still quite a lot that was similar, and so many fantastic storylines that I just absolutely fell in love with. And I love the way that a lot of it unfolded. Characters I felt such an attachment to. I feel like a lot of characters were done with better justice in the graphic novels, and they were dragged to filth in the TV show. So I'm still so bitter now that I've read this, that the TV show did dirty so many characters. This was just a phenomenal ride. I read all 32 volumes in like a week, and I had the best time. I really did. So I think definitely worth checking out if you just like graphic novels, if you like zombie stories. And that ending though, honestly, I was so sad. I was so sad. I don't know if I'm just getting soft in my old age, but it just made me so sad. Oh, of course I'm going to mention One Piece. Like, this has become my entire personality for the past 3 months. I am obsessed with One Piece. I haven't felt joy since when I discovered Frostheart, honestly. Like, this reminded me of the love and adoration I had for that series when I discovered it. Oh my god, I got chills just thinking about it. But also it might be because the room's quite cold. But still, I just think this has taken over my life, and for a very good reason. I have fallen in love with this world. I really have. One Piece, it is set in a great age of piracy. There was a pirate called Gold Day Roger who left the One Piece, which will make you king of the pirates. And so every pirate is out looking for it. But we follow Luffy, and he grows up wanting to be the king of the pirates, and he has to try and like form his crew. But like, it's so much more than that as well. Like, that's that's just like the very base level of what this kind of initial premise is about. I am currently 24 volumes into the series, or 25. No, I think it's 25 actually. And that's only a quarter of the series. There are over 100 volumes and it's still ongoing. And the characters, I cannot tell you how much I love them. Luffy, Zoro, Nami, Sanji, Usopp, Chopper. There's just so many people I love. The stories are fantastic. The story arcs are fantastic as well. I always find myself every single day thinking, I just want to pick up a volume of One Piece right now. That's all I want to do. And I can't do that because I need to do other videos. So it's just like, oh, this is my favorite thing of the year, honestly. Like, One Piece is my favorite thing of the year. Oh god. And it started a huge love for manga, and I can't seem to get out of it. I really can't. It's a spiral. I've fallen down a rabbit hole. Oh, I just love it so much. A total change of pace then, but Dick Fight Island, volumes 1 and 2. I mean, Dick Fight Island Volume 1 was the first manga I read this year. The first manga I ever read. And I actually really liked it. I really, really enjoyed it. And I haven't stopped thinking about it since, honestly. I don't think I've ever read anything like it. Take a shot every single time I say that in this video. But the premise is very unique. You know, we're set on this island where there is this kind of championship where two men have to try and make the other one do something before the other in order to win. And there are spectators watching this, and I'm like, this is so bizarre. But oddly, I love the characters. And I would say even Volume 2, I probably love the characters even more in Volume 2. And it's a totally different vibe. So different to the first one. It's more a little bit like anthology-esque. But honestly, don't knock this off. It's so good. It's so good, but very, very hot. Very explicit. If you don't want explicit and you want more wholesome, then Gavin, I read Volume 1 back in July. I would say this is almost like the manga version of Heartstopper. It's very wholesome. And I've only read Volume 1, so I haven't really gotten the biggest taste of the characters just yet. But I see something sparked, and I can't wait to see what happens next. I can't wait to see how these friendships and relationships develop. But it does follow a couple of high school students, and they become part of a band, or at least like one of them gets invited to join the other on a band. And there are two other guys in the band as well. They're a little bit older, and even them two have something that might be going on between them. Like, so literally them two, it seems like are falling in love, and then them two are falling in love, and I'm like, this is like the most wholesome thing ever since Heartstopper, of course. And I just absolutely loved it. And I love the whole band aspect of it as well. And like there's 6 volumes out so far, and I still have only read the first volume, so I will read the rest of them. It was a great start to the story. And then finally I did read a couple literally the other day for a manga tournament, and they are Berserk and Spy Family Volume 1. I loved these both so much. Berserk is very dark, very grim, and it does follow a guy called Guts. He is the Black Swordsman, and he is in this like medieval kind of world. And I don't really know what's going on, to be honest, but I am so excited to read more from it. But Volume 1 gave me such a great taste test into the world and how like kind of really graphic and dark it is. So I'm excited about that. And Spy Family as well was so wholesome. It follows a guy who is a spy, and his latest mission involves him having to infiltrate a private academy. And the only way he can really do that is to adopt a young girl called Anya, who turns out to be a telepath. And he has to find a wife as well. And he ends up coming across somebody who turns out to be an assassin. But they each have their secrets from each other. They don't tell each other who they really are. And it leads to some fantastically hilarious predicaments. And it's just so great. I love it. And so these two definitely would wholeheartedly recommend, the newest additions to my manga obsession. So yeah, I think all of those books are my favourite books of the year. This was probably a mess of a video. Honestly, when I tell you, I don't write reviews, and I don't really write very much anything down when I've read a book. I just talk about it in a video and then I move on to the next. And so I feel like I just gave none of these the justice they deserved. And I need to work on that a lot better next year. So I will try that. But yeah, I found new obsessions. I found a lot of new 5-star books, and I'm so excited for 2023 in all honesty. I genuinely think next year will be just as good as 2022 in terms of finding new favourites. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave all the comments down below. Let me know your favourite books of 2022. Do you agree with any of mine? Or any of mine similar to yours? Let me know. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons for supporting my channel. If you'd like to join my Patreon or follow me on any social media, then all the links are down in the description. If you'd like to go to Japan with me as well, link in description too. Check it out. But yeah, that's it, and I hope I will see you in the next video. Bye!